All right, are we all ready for the next panel? We have a very, very good panel coming up right now. Moving on to this one, the panel is on data deployment architecture, creating a conducive and robust architecture to support the data strategy. So let me introduce you to all our panelists for this particular panel. First, we have Mr. Praveen Singh, Director, Data Engineering at PayU. Please. Our next panelist is Ms. Preeti Arora, Director of Engineering at Walmart Global Tech. Next we have Mr. Kumar Alagappan, Senior Director, Data Science and Customer Analytics at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Our next panelist is Mr. Ashutosh Dikshit, Director, Technology Consulting at LTI Mindtree. And now to moderate this panel, may I request Mr. C. Ramalingam, Senior Director of Products and Operations, Dun & Bradstreet, India.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Warm welcome to all of you to this exciting event. My name is Ramalingam. I have on stage with me a distinguished set of panelists who kindly agreed to take their time out and share their experiences on a topic that is really critical to us, right? Data and data architecture. So before we actually, sorry. Hi, Puneet. Yeah, come. Sorry, Puneet.
Sorry, we also have Mr. Puneet Tripathi, Head Data Scientist at Wakefit. Can we have a huge round of applause for him?
Thank you. So before we jump in, there is a quote, I think, which all of us have heard. Data is the new oil, originally attributed to Clive Humby, who's a British mathematician, of late quoted by Mr. Mukesh Ambani. The quote actually strikes me for the metaphor, right? When you, in the oil industry, when you actually, when you're looking for oil and when you actually hit gold, there is a gush of oil that actually comes out, right? And that's what, that's what makes people happy in that business. And the metaphor was something that struck me. If you look at data, it's not that we've not worked with data. We've been working with data. I mean, Bangalore is the home to the technology industry for many, many decades, right? In fact, to some of us who are on the grayer side, I started my career in the mid-90s and we had a full-blown ERP system. We worked with data. In fact, I believe what we had also was a cloud. But we didn't have the quantum of data that we are dealing with today, right? The volume of data, the velocity of data, and as Preeti said backstage, the variety of data, all three of that has just shot through the roof. Some of those terms that we hear today, zettabytes of data, I actually don't know how much of data that is, right? At some point you stop counting the zeros and you just know it's a lot of data, right? That has posed a really unique challenge to all of us in business. How do we organize it? How do we make sense of it? What are the challenges around it? And to do all of that, one thing that has to fundamentally, that we have to get right is to get the architecture behind it. Otherwise, you really can't do anything with that. Now, with that, and without further ado, I want to pose my first question to Praveen. So Praveen, from PayU and from your journey that you have done so far, can you tell us in the audience, can you walk us through the kind of explosion of data that you've seen, structured, unstructured, over the last decade or so, and what is the challenges that you've seen, right? What are you grappling with today? I'll have to switch on the mic. There is a...
Hi. Yeah, thanks for the question, Rama. So in this years, I think the data was always there, as you said. But during this year, what has changed is earlier we used to only take the data which was required to do certain analytics. With technology growing, with storage becoming more economical, now we store a lot of data which was even not stored earlier, right? So now the reason why the data has generated, has gone into giant is that So right now, all of the things, whether, and if you see the large data sets, these are like generated by logs, not by written by human, right? So earlier, uh, so I used to do, like, in starting off my career, I was talking to you backstage, right? I was consulting Dun and Bradstreet, and we used to see data, and it was the Dun and Bradstreet number and all, where I saw that a lot of things were entered manually back, like 10 years back, 12 years back. So those data were of limited size. But if you see the petabytes or the gigabytes of data that you are seeing today are mostly machine generated logs or clickstream data, or one of the largest data set that I have come across is from aviation industry, where the logs from aviation is getting collected. So now most of the data that we are seeing today are machine generated data, right? And that's where the power of data, I mean, there are some data which are sitting where we know that the data is there, but we are still figuring out how to use that. We're making model around it, right? So with these huge amount of data, the challenge has also come, right? With how to store that data efficiently. Although storage is cheap, but at some point of time, if you are storing it and it's sitting in one place, it is of no use. At some point of time, you have to retrieve it and then extract some information which is useful from it. So the challenges now with huge amount of data is how do you store it? How do you create a metadata out of it so that you can efficiently retrieve only the data which is required? Then how do you create a discovery on top of it? So you have like petabytes of data sitting, but if you don't have a proper metadata, how would you discover that? So earlier when the data was small, you used to create index on databases, right?
Correct.
But now, since the data is not stored in databases or data warehouses, it's stored in data lake, it's stored in lake houses. So do you have efficient tool to create a catalog out of it or a data discovery platform out of it to extract that information? Now, once you have that catalog or the data discovery tool, then how do we, in a cost efficient manner, extract that data and use it to generate from data to generate insightful thing? Otherwise, the whole data is noise, right? You have to create
Yes.
or extract signal out of it.
Correct.
So the next challenge is how do I do it efficiently in terms of cost that I can extract that data and use it. Once we reach to this level, then comes the data science part and the AI part, which is the new like the new electricity nowadays, which everyone is talking about. So
Yes.
I'll just hand over to the next
Thank you.
panelist to
Thank
talk
you.
more about it. This
Yeah.
was like just a crux of things that I see that today the challenges are.
No, thank you,
you.
Praveen. And I like the term, the new electricity. That's a good one. So, the amount of data, as you said, in fact, aviation industry is generating one of the highest logs, right? I actually wanted to move to Preeti, who runs Walmart Tech. We got the flavor from Praveen in terms of what he's seeing here and what he's seen here over the last decade. What is it that you're seeing when you're working for Walmart and for the markets in the US and other places? Obviously, data has exploded, but do you see similar kind of challenges, or are the challenges different? What are you seeing really in what you're doing?
Sure, Rama. Thanks for that question. And before I give my answer, good afternoon, everybody. Really a pleasure to be here to talk through my experiences. So in terms of the challenges, Rama, I would say every industry is going through the same kind of challenges, right? Data is exploding at a phenomenal exponential rate, right? And then challenges about storage, about cost optimization, about optimizing the data itself, securing it, having the right kind of insights, they exist everywhere. Now, having said that, in terms of solving, now we all know the problem is there, but in terms of solving, in my experience, I think taking a step back, before we even come to the solution, it's about let's define the right data strategy, as the first panel was talking about, right? What are the business outcomes that you are after? What is that information you would want to derive that data to make it meaningful? Why are you even consuming that data? Is there innovation that you are after? Is there cost optimization? Is there product repositioning that you are after? Is there product differentiation or beating the competition that you're after? what is it that you're after, right? How do you really, then comes the how, right? And in terms of the how, from a technology perspective, it's like this. The kind of data that all of our technology solutions are consuming, ingesting, curating, producing today, it's, even the first panel did talk about it, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, and the volume is high, the velocity is varying, there is real-time data being processed, there is batch processed data, there is streaming data, there is near-time processing data, the levels of consistency that we expect, the levels of availability that we expect, right? All of that, and then there is variety, as we said, right? And the value. I think I want to add another fourth V out there. What kind of value we want to get from the data, what kind of use cases, is the value, again, around your business goals, is the value around getting more customers, getting more revenue, what is it? And these 4 V's basically take us to this something called as big data, right? And in terms of the solution, then it's about, you have your data strategy trying to define the what and where do we want to get to. The kind of data now defined, what kind of data are we having, and all of these 4 V's. Then the next set is the architecture, the data architecture, or the big data architecture, right? Now the big data architecture, in terms of the solution, basically separates different layers. Layers to collect data, to store, to ingest, even before storage, ingest, curate, store, monitor, secure it, optimize it, analyze it, and then provide those visualized insights, right? So that's where the technologists really, come into, and that's where, a lot of work we, at Walmart also, get into doing. What's our big data architecture like, and what is that tech stack that we want to really, use at every layer of this architecture, right? And there are a lot of technologies. Of course, 10 years back, the data strategy in terms of, things was a lot of structured data, a lot of relational data, and on-prem, 10 years that have passed now, it has all moved to cloud, right? And not just a single cloud, now it's like multi-cloud. So all of that again, becomes, and then every cloud provider has a different cloud native stack. Every other technology company, right? The B2B technology companies, right? The enterprises, right? They're also coming with so much, right? There's Hadoop, Spark, Cassandra to solve a different part of the data architecture. There is AWS data lake, data formation. There is Azure data lake. There is AWS S3 buckets. Again, a different part of the data architecture. There is AWS Athena. There's so many, these technologies trying to solve the problem at a different layer in the architecture. And I think fundamentally, as a last thought in my experience, what I would say is, as technologists, it's not wise for us to pick our choices just by the features that tech stack offers. It is still going back to what we were discussing even in the first panel. Let's first understand the business, right? Let's understand what do we want to go after, and then, really build all of these. And that's how, we are also solving our challenges.
Agreed. So thank you for that, Preeti. In fact, there are a lot of topics that you touched on, right? The central theme that emanates is the trade-off that you have to make. You're not solving for just one thing. You're not solving for scale or just integrity. It's not an or conversation, right?
Correct.
It's a trade-off that we all have to fix. I know I'm going sequentially, but it's not by design. Kumar, I just wanted to talk to you about how these kind of trade, so you're looking at scale, you're looking at integrity, you're looking at cost, you're looking at speed, and a variety of these things, right? And when you design the architecture, when you're really talking about that, how does one really make these trade-offs? And what would you prioritize over the other?
Right. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel. And thanks for the question, Rama. So in terms of the trade-offs, I think one is, I would say, visibility to the data that you have, and then entitlement, right? Which is, do you really need to have access to this data for the business value as the previous panelist was talking about, right? So if you look at it from that framework of visibility versus entitlement, then you sort of have to apply controls in terms of do you really need this much compute? Do you really need this much storage? Do you really need this amount of volume of this data for you to drive whatever business decision that you're making? And the other thing, the complexity in today's enterprises, like especially larger scale enterprises and mid-scale enterprises, is that data does not sit like centrally in one place, right? So there is the inherent nature of different global functions in an organization, and different business processes that run in parallel. Like data gets produced at almost all places, right? And it gets stored, closer to where it gets produced, and you might not have like the data and analytics governance that is coming into place is very much a recent phenomenon, right? Because governance was very decentralized and everyone kind of did what they wanted to, right? And the sort of maturity in terms of data practices that people had was not equitable across all functions. So there are some functions which, like, the lifeblood for them is data, and they had like investment in data scientists and data engineering and data platforms, so they are very mature. And there are some functions probably which do not have that same maturity, but they still have a business process and they produce that data, right? And when you want to make or derive value out of data, like what happens is you have to sort of interconnect all this together in a way that also, you have to factor in the compliance and privacy risks and all these other security aspects that are there today. And then when I was talking about this visibility versus, entitlement, you kind of have to factor in all those risks, the value that you're getting out of that business process, and then the scope for interconnecting all this together, and then deriving that value and, serving it to, whatever downstream workflows that you want to, serve it to, right? So when you kind of have to look at it in totality, like I would say, now versus like 15 years back when we were in this industry, I would say at that point in time, we had this limitation in compute power, we had limitation in storage, we already had constraints that we had to work with. So it was not like, you had endless resources to do whatever you wanted to, right? And today, maybe because of the public cloud and, all the sort of freely available, not freely, there's a cost to it always, but it's like you don't probably understand that, right? Like, because for right now it's more about time to value, and you just want to kind of go to the market very quickly, right? And so you just sort of, don't factor in all these constraints that you had probably 15 years back. But the constraints today, I would see, is, you need to kind of think about security, compliance, governance, right? And you need to also do the trade-offs in terms of the business value that you get, and people don't come cheap. Cloud compute might be cheaper, and there might be a race to come to the bottom between all the public cloud providers, but the cost of managing data and the people who manage the data are not that cheap, right? So, so we need to kind of think about that as well in terms of trade-offs. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kumar. Couple of things that struck me from both your answers, at least, right? Both of you spoke about value being central to the whole conversation, right? I think a lot of businesses, when they talk about data, we talk about trying to consume the whole thing, right? Eat the whole animal at one go in that sense. And there is another thing that I picked up in both your conversations. You're also saying it's important to look at what do we really need, right? And therefore, do we really need to try and get our arms around everything that we are generating, or we need to be more discriminating around that, right? I want to take that thought and really move to Puneet. Two real questions around that, right? So one, from a business perspective, we heard what Praveen and PayU and Walmart and HP, what they are grappling with. At Wakefit, which is comparatively smaller, it's a big business, but it's a comparatively smaller business. Do you see data and the challenges around architecture in the same way? That's one. And the second question is, are you also looking at it in terms of what value do we get, and therefore what do we really need to work with, and what do we really need to keep away, right? How do you see that landscape, Puneet?
So I'll agree to the second part.
Is your mic on? Can people hear you?
On. Hello?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So I would agree to the part that it's a business-driven thing, and the real value comes when you understand what is the problem you're trying to solve. Interestingly, we are not just the smaller business here. We are the most younger business, I would say.
It is, yes.
Yeah, so we're
And
like
you
a
also have customers in this
yeah,
panelist.
we have
Half of us
customer
are-
in the panel, and I think I'll also have customer in the room as well.
Yes.
So and it is a business that has grown exponentially. It's the scale is not the same next year, and we serve to more than 1 million customer every year, and we sell mattresses in volumes like like a very commoditized volume, so to say. But the overall need for having a architecture which is future-proof, where you're talking about scale, and when the scale grows, it's not the same questions that you're able to answer today, you're not able to answer tomorrow because of whether it is a technology constraint, whether it is a the compute problem that others also talked about. So, and generating insight at the speed. Now, thing which comes to smaller and younger organization is that there is a very high call to action. We want it to get it done, and we want to get it done yesterday. So
Everybody,
not just
right?
you, not just me.
Talk to my boss, he's in the floor.
So it's everybody, but the hunger for getting that done a day before is way too high. So when I get questions to answer, when I get problems to solve, whether it is a recommendation problem, whether it is a problem of optimizing supply chain to reduce cost of shipment, to reduce cost of logistic, how many warehouses do we need, where do we need warehouses, all these questions are real business problems for us, because we're trying to solve a problem which is not solved. We're trying to solve logistics for larger good. We're trying to solve logistics for very small product like a bed sheet. On the contrary, we are selling mattresses as well. So cutting cost, and it's a very competitive market now. There have been a lot of similar organizations which are selling similar product. So building an architecture which is going to answer all these questions, keep you prepared for future. I mean, future-proofing the whole architecture solution, that it is going to scale. Having all the functionality that whenever, for example, a sale comes, like a Diwali sale, that our traffic, our volume, our sales, everything goes 5x. And being prepared for that, and understanding that the actions has to still keep on going, that all the abandoned carts we have to still recover, is a real-time problem for us. So securing for all those things, the seasonality through the year, as well as the growth which is going to come next year and the year after that. Every year my volume increases 2x. So right now it may appear very small to a lot of people in the room, but essentially 5 years down the line, I'm expecting that it will be very amazing to even us by all our standards.
Absolutely, and backstage we heard you have 30-35% of the market online.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's a, it's smaller to Walmart, but of course it's a big business. I mean, no doubt about that. So thank you for that, Puneet. So now, having heard these challenges, the kind of trade-offs that people are grappling with, Ashutosh, the question really is this, right? You have businesses which are across the spectrum. Avinash spoke today morning about MSMEs and the role they play in India, in China, etc. So here's the real question. You could be a small business, you could be a micro, small, medium business, or you're a giant multinational. All of us are facing with the same problem. There is an explosion of data that has to be handled. You need architecture to deal with it, and at the end of the day, you need value out of it, right? As the other panelists have spoken. At Mindtree, when you're solving these problems for your customers, do you see this being solved differently for different sizes of customers, or is it the same challenge and therefore the same answer?
Thanks. Ashutosh here, I am from LTI Mindtree. Yeah, problem is same, right? Maybe flavor is different. Somebody is having vanilla, another is having coffee, right? One of the CTO I was working with, and what he said that data is like opinion. Right? I take it from you, it's opinion.
Oh, okay.
I take it from you, I will make something out of it.
Yeah.
I take it from him and her, then there is some more out of it. Then once I start collecting from maybe 100 people, I wouldn't know what to do. So I have met customers and I have worked a lot with retail customers. So a common theme that has come that generally CTOs are happy with one data product. They're slightly less happy with two data products. And when there are about endless data sources, it's an overwhelming set of information. And it kind of, at some point, it starts contradicting each other. And that is where most of your machine learning protocols break. So what we try to do is we simplify, we rather work on quality of data than quantity of data. And this is what we advocate as well. Do not just go for any and every data. Yes, we have to collect, and courtesy public cloud and hyperscaler, storage is not the problem. You can host your data anywhere in virtually unlimited amount of capacity. And then you have on-demand capacity to process that data as well. And that too, you don't have to pay anything upfront for that. The real game starts this point onward. You got the data, you have to be a bit selective about that data. And then you have to have a right visualization tool. If you are not using right tools, you have not identified the right KPIs, things may not really work. At the same time, data should be, what is the word? It should be integrated with your system. It should not be fake rather. I'll tell you a story. One of the apparel brand I was working with a couple of years. So they had very simple marketing strategy. If I post my photo on Facebook and Instagram with a t-shirt, and if that t-shirt has that particular logo, with their AI and ML protocol, they will identify me as a buyer of that brand. And who is their next customer? Probably friends of mine. And they ran this campaign. And somewhere in African country, they realized that sale is about nothing. There was a caveat. That company was not even making any sale in that particular country, and all those photos, those were coming, those were cheap replicas. And we identified that there is a problem, and now we don't know where to pull off. Once you've identified that challenge, how do you communicate that this data is actually of no use or very less use? And this is where we decided, let's not go for quantity, because quantity, number one, it can confuse you. And number two, it can lead you to such kind of problems. So work on the quality of data and see what mechanism, what data product suits for you, try that out. And unless there is a really good reason, don't go for multiple sources. This is what we advocate and works for about significantly good amount of customers. Okay. But again, it's not a formula that will fit for all sizes.
Understood. Thank you so much. So, once more, we're talking about value and we're talking about being selective about what data we consume and how we consume. And I want to go back to you, Kumar. There are 2 points you made. Compute power is cheap, but people are not. And so the question that, that comes to mind is this. If you go talk to a business user or a business person, right? People say, costs have fallen dramatically, and the reality is compute costs have fallen, storage costs have fallen, so why can't we really get more of data into our systems? That's one question that comes. My question to you is, how does somebody when they are deciding the data, the architecture, and all of the conversations, how does one bridge that conversation? How would you have a conversation with a business user who says, hey, compute costs have gone down, as I see, everything is now scale is available, prices are down. How do we make that choice? What would be your take on that?
Yeah, so actually it's a reversal of roles. So I am the line of business user and I have these difficult conversations with IT, saying that the compute cost is low, so why are you pressurizing me to sort of reduce my storage? So the arguments that are put forth, I think one has to be top down in terms of culture. And the reason why I say that is, we can store as much as we want to, and we can analyze as much as we want to. Now, as a line of business user, the question that my CMO or my leader asks me is that actually adding value to your recommendations? Because as a point he raised, like you could have a counterfeit T-shirt, and then you might think, I should put some ad dollars on Facebook in a country that I don't sell to, but you should have known in the first place that you did not have revenues from this country in the first place, or you don't have any distribution or marketing here. So, which means like in the zeal of collecting information and your recommendation models, your propensity models, or whatever that you put out, you will need to first understand, is that data point actually adding value to the recommendations or anything that you're making? And the line of business data scientists should be answerable to kind of help understand or explain. It can't be a black box AI model that you're not able to explain, what value this model is delivering. So generally what happens is people in sales, they usually get frustrated. It's like, this is what the model is telling, right? So go ahead and sell to this customer or so on and so forth. But every data feature that you have there has to be explainable in terms of the value that data feature is giving in terms of the recommendation that you're making, right? And more often than not, by storing inordinate amount of data, you're actually, the predictive power of the model goes down actually, right? So you need to be very selective about what information that you pick to decipher what the recommendation is. So that's like one, which is as a line of business user, you need to put your people on their toes to kind of answer all these questions, right? So that's like number one. Number two is I'm a line of business marketing person, right? And for me, like GDPR is a big deal because you can't store. If you are on the internet, then basically you might die, but your data lives on the internet, and it's immortal. But the EU basically says like you have a right to be forgotten, and you can't store data for more than 6 years about a person, right? Like, and if you do that, then you're either going to spend $20 million or 4% of your company revenues, right, as fines. So you have constraints, which is like you have to be compliant. That's like number two. Number three is security issues. Like you might store data 10 years back, and at that time the security policy or the compliance policy that was there at that point in time does not match to the compliance security policy that you have today. So by storing data like for ages, like you are somehow breaking, that might not be encrypted. You might have had very poor encryption levels at that point in time. And so by just kind of holding on to that data, you're subjecting the whole company to a risk and your customers to a risk. So these are some points of articulation that the CISO, the CIO office, and the line of business leaders do it. But the last one is cost, which we talked about. If you have a centralized IT organization which kind of pays for everyone's storage and everyone's compute, it's fine. But the moment they break out, like the cost of storage and cost of compute and the labor costs that are involved to manage it as a line item in the LOB leader's balance sheet, then it does raise a pandemonium. And that also forces behavior. So I think these are some ways that organizations control for behavior, like where they hold on to inordinate amount of data. And obviously purging policies and all these other things that IT normally does, that is always there.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that's familiar to, I'm sure, all of us, when when there is a conversation between the two sides. But there's a point you said there in terms of collecting all of the data and really figuring out where is the value there, right? And that's a theme that's now coming out more than once. I actually wanted to talk to Praveen about that. At PayU, there is a multiplicity of areas where I think you get data, right? And you are able to harvest that. You're able to build a new business model as you've done with LazyPay. What is that experience? Is it, these choices that the other panelists spoke about what to keep, what not to keep? What is the experience of PayU, and how is that translated into a new business model, right? Have you been able to harvest that? Is there commercial value?
Yeah. So as we are talking now, the laws of data in India, privacy data laws are also coming, and it's being tightened up, right?
Correct.
So it's all like as you said, that we are able to harvest a lot of data, but what data should go where? from a security perspective is also very, very important. And sometimes it's because we are in fintech and it's a kind of licensing business also, right? So now there are a lot of, you must have seen that in last 2-3 months, there is a lot of noise around the digital lending RBI guidelines, right? So what data should sit where, does it have proper compliance or not is also equally important. So when we harvest data, so in between PayU only we have many companies. So we, even between companies, there are some data which we don't share with other companies, right? So we have very, very crucial data like civil scores of people, right? Which can only sit to a particular company and can't go out of that, right? So with this amount of data coming, obviously compute and storage is something that you can throw some dollar and solve that problem. In next round of funding, you can have a dedicated like cloud cost for the some budget allocated to the cloud cost. But there is one thing that you can't compromise at any point of time is the security, right? So in US and in Europe, the GDPR laws and these things are already very tightened. But in India business also, with times ahead now, now the privacy laws in India is also getting tightened day by day, right? So when we harvest so much of data, it's also on us to like kind of keep it secured and compliant with any other businesses. So we have so many lines of business where we share data and so many data points are there. But at the same time, it is our it is of utmost important for us to keep it secured and keep it compliant. Right? I don't know whether it answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And I want to pick on the topic that you said. We spoke about value. We spoke about being really selective and what to store, all of that. But what you're also saying is, for us in India, the landscape in terms of security and privacy is really shifting now, right? And I actually wanted to talk to you, Preeti. With your customers in the US, I think that's been, and Europe, I think that conversation, they are ahead of us in terms of privacy and security. So from a data and a data architecture perspective, do you see costs going up? Do you see challenges in terms of being, in terms of looking at that universe, right? Now we really will, your first driver will really be security, right? And privacy. Is that how you see it? Do you see costs going up for businesses?
So that's a great question, Rama. So here's the thing. So at a Fortune 1 brand like Walmart, right, we have a huge responsibility to our customers, right? It's not about we are here to have revenues for the company. It's like we are here to serve our customers, right? So for us, our core value is customers first, which means any data that is coming into our systems, we just cannot be in a situation where we are not securing it. That's not a choice, like, that you can make, right? That's a liability, that's a responsibility that we have, right? A basic one towards our customer. So on one hand, data is what is driving your business. Data is what is driving your insights. It can give you new business. But at the same time, as they say, right, with great power comes great responsibility. Every one of us has heard this, seen this dialogue by our superheroes. That's where, right? So the great responsibility is that we have to secure it at all levels, right? And yes, you're right. Now there comes a trade-off. Now doing all of this, storing, securing, also driving value, it increases the costs. But at the same time, as technologists and as business leaders, right, the intelligent and the careful craft out there is, how do you make your right trade-offs between security versus cost optimization versus rising costs, right? Those are the careful choices that you have to make, and there won't be a right or a wrong, solution out there. But yes, the costs are rising. But then can we compromise on the security of the data? We cannot, right? Now then what does it mean? Then how do we solve for it is, be very mindful of what you're storing, right? And for how long, as my fellow panelists also, mentioned, right? If there is no need for that data to be in your systems for beyond certain years, then it need not be there, right? So your data archival policies, your data purging policies, data deletions policies have to be there. And we are operating in an international market, right? The federal laws, right? So in the EU there is GDPR, but in US there are many more such, right? You just can't, there is no such argument that because my costs were rising and hence I did not do it, because the impact of not doing it can actually be penalties and lawsuits for the firms, right? And for us, where we are saying our core value is customers first, we just can't go wrong there, right?
Sure.
Then the job is, as I already said, now let's figure it out. What is that simplified data set? And then, then figure out the cost part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there is any quarrel that, security is an optional.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out, and the costs will obviously have to be managed, right?
Exactly.
So there's one other point that you said around privacy, and I wanted to talk to Puneet. As a company that's overwhelmingly retail, do you see the new regulations around privacy and the awareness that the consumer also has today, right? Do you see that impacting how you harvest data and how you're able to target customers? Do you see that changing the landscape going forward, or do you think that it's going to be BAU?
So it's definitely going to be a challenge in future once the laws are there that customers can opt out and can opt in. But even now, customers have the option of opting out of the promotional messages, from being targeted, from not sharing their data. And as a company, like Preeti also said, we respect that. Security and their permission is of utmost importance, and we do not want to target a customer who is, and TRAI has guidelines around it that you can't, if I opt out, you can't do this. So yes, it is going to be slightly more challenging. They will have to figure out smarter ways to reach out to customer. And then there are already certain platforms which are coming up which do promotion on your behalf, but to the targets and to the audience that you talk about. And then we also have recently started this. So we have been building something called customer journey, wherein we are mapping what the journey of the customer has been in past, and can we create future life cycles for them on digital marketing platforms, on social media platforms, where we may not be reaching out to their more core point of or core coordinates like phones or something, but can we target them on the internet in a relatively free flowing market, so as to be much more closer to where they shop, where they spend most of their time in. But and goes without saying that security is of utmost importance to every company, even though whether we are regulated or not, because even in past there have been incidences where companies have come into limelight for wrong reasons of security breaches and everything, and of course nobody would want to be hearing questions from
their reputation is gone, your business is gone.
Yeah.
Super. So I'm conscious that we are reaching the end of time. Before we call it wraps, I'd just like to go around and see if there are any questions from the audience for our panelists today. Okay, it's a multiple hands, so I'm just going to go to you, sir. I'll try and get you a mic, and we'll see if it. Sorry. This
Hello.
question is for
Preeti, Walmart. Yeah. So,
I'll come to you, sir.
Starting from third week of November till January first week, we know what you undergo that, right?
Yes.
We know very well. With Black Friday and Christmas and all that put together. How the architecture is, this is purely technical, how your architecture is, flexible enough to scale up in those peak times. Do you have any secret sauce in that? Can you share with the team?
So that's a great question, but I have to admit the secret sauce I won't be able to share because it's a public platform and I'm bound by my company's, this thing. But I think there are a lot of, sorry, but I think, Okay. The answer I think for every technologist, it lies in, do you have a architecture which is well thought out in terms of scale, in terms of resiliency, in terms of being well architected itself, the well architected framework, right, that AWS has put together, and many other, such frameworks are there. Is it highly available, right? Is it like, okay, one data center going down is then just, really come into a problem, and suddenly your customers are not going to be able to see the app pages or the website pages load up. So there are all of those basics that go into, and this is not just for us as a business. I think any business that serves, millions of customers, those are the standard best practices, right? So I think that's where the answer lies. But yeah, I cannot be going into the secret sauce. Sorry about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. The question I have is, and it's basically on the ESG theme. And Avinash also spoke in the morning about the 2.5 quintillions data we are generating. I don't remember whether it was per day or per year. But what is the environment impact of storing all this data, and with so many Fortune 500 companies moving their data to the cloud, and the amount of energy required to store that data? So don't you feel that 10 or 15 years down the line, the data function itself would be under the scanner to be more green? And how the companies can gear up for that?
So did you have anybody in mind?
No, it's a general question to the panel, anyone who wants to take it.
I'll take this one. Of late, I've worked very closely with the sustainability model. And whatever you have raised is valid, and I'll simplify that. He's saying that you are storing a lot of data, and to store that data, you need hardware. And to run that hardware, you would emit certain amount of carbon dioxide, and how good it is for your environment. So the kind of solution, and again, it's in concept stage, what we have been giving is, number one, you need to come out of redundant data mindset. Whenever there is no need, you don't have to make copy of it. Yes, of course, there is some data you need backup, but not a lot of data. Then second, we have suggested not to store any local copies of the data. Let it be on centralized place so that everybody can have access to it. That way, for example, if I have to send a 5 MB document to each one of you, one way is I will attach it and email it to everyone. Even if you don't want it, there is still a local copy in your server, right? Or rather, I will send a SharePoint link and you just use it. If you need it, you will download, or you'll just ignore it. That's another way what we have been doing. And third thing that we are advocating is that unless there is a compliance regulation, start storing data to locations where we have less carbon emissions. So there are data centers available in maybe African part of the world where carbon emission can be neutralized. Let's start using that landscape, that the place you should park your data. So these are the things we are keeping in mind while advocating our client. And again, this whole ESG game boils down to how you actually processing the data as well. So we have given one suggestion that you should never locally process the data. Let it be centrally processed. Those are much more optimized hardware than your local server at least. So again, I can take it backstage as well, and a lot of things I can talk about. Last 6 months I have given on sustainability.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I know there are a lot of other questions, but I have 4 monitors here telling me my time's up. So I'd like to summarize now. So first, thank you very much to each one of our panelists for taking time out, making it here in Bangalore traffic. I know you have to get back to your work, but thank you so much. There are a couple of messages that came out. One, be discriminating, be really clear about what you want and what you don't want. Second, or probably even more important than the first one, see if it adds value and then work backwards, right? In terms of what data you want to store and therefore what is the right architecture for you. And the third thing, of course, I think everybody around the room agrees that security is paramount. It's not that security directly links to your reputation is gone, your business gone, right? So once again, I would request the audience, please join me in giving these panelists a huge round of applause. Thank you so much. And you've been a wonderful audience, so please give yourselves a round of applause as well. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you.
So we all know the drill. We need to have you here for a couple of more minutes, and then we'll break quickly. So I'd like to invite Mr. Mohit Gupta, Senior Director of Sales for Dun & Bradstreet India, to hand over a token of appreciation to all of you. Mr. Ashutosh Dixit. Can we have a round of applause? Mr. Puneet Tripathi. Mr. Praveen Singh. Ms. Preeti Arora. Can we have the claps going? And Mr. Kumar Alagappan. And finally, for our wonderful moderator, Mr. C. Ramalingam. All right, so while this picture is being taken, we would like to break now